Hi, everyone. Welcome back to another summer rewind edition of the podcast. Today's episode is a re airing of Jim Magruder, and his was episode 22. And one of the really interesting things about this episode for me was that it was the first episode we put to video. I had been recording everything in video up to this point, every guest interview, not solo, but the every guest interview had been recorded in video, but we just hadn't figured out exactly how we wanted to get it onto YouTube. And because we were able to air the episode around the time of the anniversary of Jim's mother's death, he wanted it to be able to go to video as a way to share with his siblings. And I just thought it was a wonderful idea. And so my son and I worked together to get this episode to video. And when I say we worked together, I mean it was mostly my son. So Tristan did most of it and helped to he figured out how to get everything working and stitched together. And we got that first episode to video. Was it perfect? No, it wasn't. But we were able to get it done and to get it done in time for that just that special anniversary. And I was very, very proud of my son for being able to make it work. And I was very thrilled to be able to give that gift to Jim and his siblings. And that's one of the other things about this episode is he shared so much about how close he is with his siblings and how they each responded to grief differently and how they each remembered their mother differently. And I love the stories that he told about lipstick and about a scar on his knee. So join in and listen to this wonderful episode and hear the beautiful storytelling of James C. Magruder as he shares about his life, experiencing grief as a child, and then learning to write from that grief and share his story with others and enabling them to heal as well. And I encourage you again to check out his book, The Desert Between Us, and also his previous book, The Glimpse. Both links will be in the show notes for you. Yeah, Jim has been nominated for an award. I believe he actually did receive a reward, an award. I guess it is a reward, but an award for his writing, and it was so well deserved. And so join me on this episode of Summer Rewind with James C. Magruder.
Are you walking through a storm that feels like it will never end? Do you wonder if life's storms have stolen the beauty from your life for good? You're in the right place. My name is Heather, and like you, I've been through a storm or two and wondered if life would ever be beautiful again. Here we share warriors' words, stories of discovering beauty after battles, and the worth in your wounds. Pick up your sword or boxing gloves and join the battle. Your words are powerful, my friends. Make them warrior words. Welcome back to the Warrior Words podcast. We are blessed to have an incredible author and storyteller join us today. James C. Magruder writes reflective essays and contemporary Christian fiction. He is the author of The Glimpse, an inspirational novel, and The Desert Between Us, which is a love after loss, victory over grief story. But this novel is more than a victory over grief story. It is an uplifting story about how a father and son find their way back to each other. Jim's articles have been published in Writer's Digest, Writer's Journal, 11 Chicken Soup for the Soul books, Home Life, and other magazines. He blogs about maximizing life by reducing the speed you live it in his blog called Pause More, Rush Less. Jim lives in Racine, Wisconsin with his wife, Karen. They have 2 adult sons, David and Mark, and 3 grandchildren. Hi, everyone. Well, as you heard in the intro, we have author James C. Magruder here with us today. Jim, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much, Heather. I'm glad to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you here. For everyone else, Jim and I have known each other for about 2 years now, I think. Maybe a little longer. Yeah.
Yep.
Online only. And we are a member of the same writing group, and we have the same writing mentor. And it's been a pleasure to get to know Jim through his writing. And so I'm very happy to have you here today. You're giving your time to be here today.
I'm happy to do it.
Oh, well, thank you. Okay, so you shared with me, and I've heard it come through your writing, that you had a traumatic loss as a child. So can you share that with our listeners today?
Yeah, sure. When I was 11 years old, my mother died of cancer, lymphoma. I'll never forget the day. It was June 6, 1965. It was a beautiful Sunday, beautiful summer day, and my dad came home from the hospital. We knew she was sick, of course, but as kids, you never know how sick is, right?
Right.
So
Yes.
we never expected that she would pass. But I remember my father calling all 6 of us kids into his bedroom, and in just 5 words, he said, "Your mother passed away today."
Mhm.
And that sent a shockwave right through all 6 children. We ranged in age from 4 to 14. I was 11.
Okay.
We had a
Mhm.
14-year-old, a 12-year-old, 11-year-old, 8-year-old, I think a 6-year-old, and a 4-year-old.
Okay.
And he was wise enough to bring my aunt and uncle with him to help absorb the shock, right?
Right.
But that was
Yes.
still, we still had a 2-to-1 advantage over them, right? 6 kids and 3 adults.
Right.
A number of us ran to my aunt, some ran to my uncle, the littlest, of course, ran to my father, and my brother just ran upstairs and laid under his bed. And he laid under that bed until nightfall. Another brother just wandered aimlessly, denying it. This didn't happen.
Right.
But it was an absolute shock, because somehow in my little kid mind of 11 years old, I expected some sort of goodbye or some kind of warning that my mom would say goodbye to me before she died. And she didn't. And so that meant for a very long night. I remember that.
Right. I can imagine that. Yeah.
Yeah.
And each of your siblings seem to have a different way of dealing with that shock, that sudden shock,
Exactly.
which exemplifies that there's just so many different ways to handle grief and shock.
Right. And I think that's why I sort of, in some ways, worked that into the book I just released, The Desert Between Us. I show that not everybody deals with grief the same way. There are no rules in how you deal with grief, and there's no time limit. It's different for everybody. Right. And if you would have filmed the 6 of us splitting up the way we did, some of us absolute sobbing, others walking away in a daze, and still another sliding under his bed in fear, you would see that grief really affects people differently.
Yeah, it seems really, and that's something that I've been learning with doing this podcast is talking to different people who have different traumatic events. They handle them all differently. There's no right way to handle trauma. There are many different ways I think just as many ways to handle it as there are traumatic events that happen to us as humans.
Yeah.
And then, going forward from that, there's so many different ways to heal and survive with that. So how did you and your siblings move forward after that day?
I think for me, I would say there's probably a lot of things, but I would say three things in particular. One would be leadership. My father demonstrated leadership. Um, he was a person that could really accept things well. I mean, he was also a World War II veteran and fought at Iwo Jima, so he saw the worst of everything.
Yes. Yes.
And he used to have a saying, and that saying was, "It's just the way it is." And so, no matter what would happen to us, he would say, "That's the way it is. Now let's go forward." And so, he was a father that he did not ask why. He instead asked, "What's next?" And
Okay. Yeah.
I've often said that my father kept us um, moving forward by just keeping us moving. Okay.
Okay.
He didn't allow us to settle into grief. He had a saying too that, listen, we can't get stuck. We have to keep moving forward. And we keep moving forward by moving. So
Right.
my mother died on a Sunday afternoon. On Monday, we all went to school.
Oh,
Um,
wow. Okay.
yeah. So he tried to keep normalcy as much as he could. And so he kept us on a schedule. He kept us, he gave us jobs to do. Some handled the lawn, some handled the dishes, some did the vacuuming. The older girls did some of the cooking. And we had responsibilities to work through our grief by occupying ourselves with what we now have to do to replace what mom did. And so he
That's
demonstrated
right.
a lot of leadership. And I think that needs to be emphasized is that leadership is really important in getting a person through grief, particularly a child. And again, I talk a lot about that in the desert between us. The second thing is, I think this started me personally on a journey to find God. You know, I wanted to
Okay.
know, why did mom have to die? And I set out to find out everything I could about why she might have died and what was God's role in this, in doing it, allowing it, or not preventing it, those kind of things. And in the process of going to Bible studies, particularly when I got older, this is when, high school age and older, I started studying the Bible for myself and came to a personal faith in the Lord Jesus Christ, and
Hmm.
that helped me understand that um, the Lord is involved, even though we'll never understand why. And one thing I wanted to mention to you and your listeners is all of the why questions I asked now, 59 years later, have still not been answered, right? I'll never
Yes.
know why she had to die. Why then? Why at that time? Why after having her sixth child, 4 years after having her sixth child? And, but I've come to uh, claim Christ as my Savior and to study the Bible, and that's a part of my daily routine. And verses like Jeremiah 29:11, I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans for
Hmm.
your welfare, not calamity, to give you a future and a hope. I claim that. I believe that. In Isaiah 55:8-9, he says, my thoughts are not your thoughts, and my ways are not your ways. And so the why questions were never really answered and never will be until I'm in heaven, probably.
Right.
But all I can say is one benefit of it, though, is the way it caused me to search for God and then to tell my siblings about what I was learning from the Bible. And then all of them, all five of them, starting their own search and all landing on the same Bible and same faith. And we drew together that now, 59 years later, we're an incredibly close family. All
You
because,
just made me tear up.
yeah, well, all due to trauma, right? It all was
Yeah.
born out of trauma.
Well, I think so. So you may not have directly gotten your answer of why, but you may have found a reason. And I think
Yes.
there can be a difference between those two, um, because something good, a good fruit, came from it.
Yes, exactly. And the third thing I was going to say to you, the three things that helped me survive was leadership, faith in God, and shared grief. And by shared grief, I mean it was a benefit to me to share my grief with five siblings. I mean, here are five people sharing the same pain, the same chaos, the same fear, the same what do I do now? And to have a community, if you will, of people sharing grief. They say misery loves company, right?
Right.
But when we share grief with someone close to us and you go through it together, you're stronger because of it. So
Yes, you
those
are.
were the three things that allowed me to survive. And then there are also some things that help me thrive through.
Okay, so you had mentioned to me earlier, Jim, that you started finding some healing and part of that survival in your writing. And I know you've written a lot of things. You've mentioned the book, The Desert Between Us, and I definitely want to get to that. But you've written a lot prior to that. So
Right.
can you explain how writing or sharing your story helped you heal and helped others heal?
Yeah. Um, well, I think having gone through a trauma gives you it changes your writing because you can write from a greater detail for one thing,
Right.
because you can describe things because of having felt them. You can write from greater depth. You can write with greater accuracy, um, and you can write with greater compassion. And I think that's how my writing has changed. For example, you mentioned The Desert Between Us. In that book, um, I represent several points of view. One is from Chase Kincaid, that's the 37-year-old father. He lost his wife and his mother. His son lost his mother because, of course, he lost his wife. His
Right.
father lost his wife at one time, so that Chase knew how his son felt because he lost his mother as well. The love interest that he'll meet lost her father due to a suicide, and lost a fiance due to unfaithfulness. Jack's best friend, or excuse me, Chase's best friend, lost his wife due to a divorce. So you can see that I'm coming at grief and loss from many different points of view.
Right.
And
Yeah.
because I can write from the point of view of my father, watching him as I grew up, I watched how my father deal with his loss. I was the son who lost the mother, so I
Right.
can write from that point of view. So I think the beauty of the trauma for us in terms of my writing is it gave me the skills to write from multiple points of view and to write in greater detail, greater depth, greater accuracy, making sure the feelings are right. I just got off the phone with somebody before talking to you, and he said, I can't believe how you nailed it in your dialogue about how they felt. And he said, but I know how you nailed it. You nailed it because you felt it. I said, that's right. This was a dear friend. So,
Yes.
and you can write with greater compassion. So I think that's how the writing has changed. Is you're not assuming how people feel, you felt.
Right. And that, yes, that does give a different voice to the words that get, I guess, not put on paper. Well, I guess they are put on paper, but we do it
Yeah,
more electronically now. But
yeah,
yes.
exactly.
So what are some of the other things that you have written?
First of all, I have a blog that's obviously a nonfiction blog called Pause More, Rush Less. And that goes out once a month. And that's about how to slow down your life enough so that you don't miss life's most meaningful moments. Pause more, rush less. And it's all about uh, almost nostalgia, about slowing your life down so that the most meaningful moments you can enjoy. For example, I'll talk about journaling. And then the beauty of journaling is you can live your life twice. You'll live your life
Yes.
the first time, and then the second time when you journal about it, you're living those experiences again, and you're not missing the detail. So I just last Friday, they go out like the third Friday or second Friday of the month. Um, my 100th issue is coming up in the next within 3 issues.
Hmm.
So I've been doing this now for a number of years, and it's the audience has been wonderful, and it's growing, and they enjoy the writing because it's all nonfiction. I've also written for 11 Chicken Soup for the Soul books, and all of those have to be nonfiction too. And so
Mhm.
they are things that happen to you. And they're everything from my writing life to my father's tour of duty in World War II about the spirit of America was the name of that issue. Um, there's other issues about what is the best advice you've ever received. So I tell what the best advice I ever received about how I could raise my kids.
Mhm.
Um, all of those kind of things I have written about. I've written several stories about, one story is called Finding the Light in the Darkness, and that's about my
Mm.
mother's death. And what was the light that came out of that dark period of my life? So I write a lot about my experiences, not just with grief, but with relationships. Everything I do is relationship oriented because I believe there's nothing more important in this world than people. So while there's
Yes.
different genres like fantasy and romance, all these other kind of things, I write something about a relationship between father and son, husband and wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, anything that has to do with the human condition. I start with a theme. I start like my first book, The Glimpse, was actually a forgiveness and reconciliation between a father and adult son when they didn't like each other at all. What caused that? And
Wow.
how did they reconcile? This one, Love After Loss and Victory Over Grief. The Christmas Photograph, that's about how a photograph can stir our emotions. Long old photograph can stir our emotions and it will restore grandfather, father, and son. I want to do a story on regrets. We all have regrets. So I
Yes, we
always
do.
start with a theme and then I work my way out of it where it's going to go.
Okay. Well, I'm going to make sure that we have a link to the glimpse and a link to the desert between us in the show notes. But I can't put a link to the photograph, the Christmas photograph, because that one is not ready yet.
That's right.
Correct.
Yes.
That one is
Yeah.
coming soon.
Yes, right. I hope so. It's with my agent now and 4 publishers. So he's waiting to see. I think they're all waiting to see how well does the Desert Between Us sell, and then they'll jump on it.
Okay, so
So
everybody get out there and order the desert between us.
yes, there you go. Thank you.
so, so I've heard you mention a couple times the word beauty.
Yeah.
And one of the things that we talk about here on the Warrior Words podcast is finding the beauty in the broken. And I try to ask everybody about that, but I think you have already answered that question because you have mentioned finding beauty in a couple different ways. And then I think it also leads to another reason, maybe not a why, but a reason in that. So the first reason, you had all your siblings come together and
Yeah.
develop an understanding of and relationship with God, with Jesus specifically.
Yeah.
But then also, you're writing about all of these themes that other people can relate to, that other people can heal from. And it's just this traumatic effect has given you that place, that position from which to write,
Yes.
from which to offer others a voice that maybe they may not have been able to express themselves. And
Yeah.
so I think those are two really good fruits or good gifts, if you will, um, from your life's experiences.
Yeah.
So,
American novelist Cormac McCarthy once said, "Our scars remind us that our past is real."
yes.
And so, what does that have to do with this? Our scars remind us that our past is real, and our scars then remind us of both the sacred and the scar itself. So, for example, I have a scar on my right knee that last summer I was writing about these type of things and I was wearing shorts and I looked at my knee and the scar is still there and I ran my thumb over the scar and the scar reminded me not only of the accident, which was I fell down the staircase when I was 8 years old and hit a table at the bottom of the staircase.
Mhm.
I cut it open and I was bleeding profusely. So the scar reminds me that my past is real for the sake of the accident, but it also reminds me of what I call the sacred. And the sacred was, that's one of the few times, one of the last times I would have where my mother comforted me as a boy,
Oh,
when
wow.
she stopped the bleeding, hugged me, and then put a Band-Aid on it and those kind of things, and gauze and all these kind of things.
Right.
A few years later, she would die. So um, the beauty is in the scar is what else came out of it, which was that relationship with my mother, and that last comfort I had before she died. And the scar reminds me of that. So that's the beauty in the scar.
Yes, it is. And that's a beautiful story. And I love that you are sharing those stories with us, because stories are so important. And like you said, the scar is a physical reminder of the actual event. And now you can share that event and share that story with others. I have a fly. Sorry. um, so now you can share that with other people, and I find stories so fascinating, and maybe that's why we write. You know,
Yeah. And, from this viewpoint of my sisters, for example, you've heard my point of view, but, there were 3 boys and 3 girls. My
Mhm.
sisters only recently told me this story, and I worked it into my book, and that was, they told me of how they remembered my mom when they were little girls. They didn't necessarily tell me this all the way, and as a child, they told me this as adults now, 59 years later. What they used to do, Heather, is they told me that they hid, after she died, they hid a tube of her lipstick. And when they were alone and they were sad and they missed her, they would go get that tube where they hid it and pull it out in their bedroom and turn the tube, roll up the lipstick and smell it because it reminded them of mom's fragrance when she kissed them goodnight. It's amazing.
Yeah, I got
Um,
chills. I got chills when
yeah,
when you shared that. Senses are so important, because that was the sense of smell, and the
yeah,
sense and the sense of also probably the color, the visual sense, the color, the shape.
yeah.
Wow.
I
Wow.
mean,
Senses are
and
so
as
powerful.
one of the boys, I would never think of that, but
No, no.
that's what her daughters were thinking of. They also did the same thing with her hair. She was my mother before she had all the kids, she had her own beautician shop. She was a beautician by trade. So she
Mm-hmm.
knew how to do a great job with hair, and the way she would brush the girls' hair, something that I never paid much attention to, right? But
Right.
look what they latched on to remember the beauty of their mother.
Yes, I think yes, we all have different things that remind us of and take us back to those precious moments with our loved ones. Yeah,
Right.
definitely. Okay. All right. So how would you describe how you are thriving today? Is that through your writing, or are there other ways?
I would say I'm pretty much healed of a trauma from 59 years ago.
Hmm.
But and I would say that I'm definitely thriving through the writing, because I realize there's a message in the things that have happened to me. Um, I believe that uh, I've been given a gift. I don't overstate it, but I believe that I can write something in such a way that it'll be meaningful to somebody else, and that alone to me feels like a nice gift that I should be a good steward of. And
I
so
agree. Yes.
So I'm writing about the things that have so profoundly affected me, with the belief that if they affected me this profoundly, they can they can affect others. And in
Right.
some of the reviews I've just got on the Desert Between Us, I really tune into what people are saying. And a couple of people have said, I have found healing in watching your characters heal.
Oh, wow.
Well,
Yeah.
man, that's why we do this, right? I mean, I've never lost sight of the fact that I write for ministry value first.
Mm.
And then,
Point.
like Richard Paul Evans and others would tell us, you also write for some type of return on your investment so that you can keep writing. You need to
Yes,
pay your bills, right?
exactly.
But writing, for me, it's ministry value comes first. So when I read reviews that tell me that affected my life, there's the value.
Yes.
And that's why I keep doing it. That affirmation. They always say that other people identify your gifts. We don't walk around and self-proclaim our gifts. But if I
Right.
feel equipped to write in such a way that helps others, I want to do it.
Yes, and it is a gift, and you have been given that gift, and you freely share it, and so you have then given that gift to our listeners today, and I am very appreciative of that.
Yeah.
So, but you also mentioned,
Yeah, go ahead.
you also mentioned that you wanted to offer something to our listeners. Does that go with the your monthly blog, or how can they access that?
It was on my blog, or I could send anyone who wants it the link. So um, it was 5 reasons why I wrote The Desert Between Us, because I found that a lot of readers like to know what's behind a story. Why did you write this
Yes,
story?
story behind the
Uh,
story. Yes.
the story behind the story. And in the case of the 5 reasons why I wrote it, well, first of all, just one thing is it was inspired by my father because I watched him lose my mother.
Right.
And I like to say that I was so taken by how much my father loved my mother that my father's son wrote a novel about it. And there I am,
Yeah.
right? I mean,
Yeah.
if my father was alive today, I would say, Dad, I've been so impressed over the years by how much you love mom that I wrote a novel about.
Wow.
Um,
What a
and
testament to your father as well.
yeah,
Yes.
so I thought your readers might be interested in why did I write it more than just that one reason. There are 5 reasons why I wrote it. And if they would like that free, they could email me at jamescmagruder@gmail.com and I could send them the link, or we could do it any way you want to do it, whether you post it or however you want to do it.
Okay. Well, I will put that information also in the show notes as well, and I will also recommend your pause more, rush less, because I am a
Yes.
recipient of that every month and
Oh, good.
enjoy every single one that I read.
Oh, good.
So very, very, very inspirational. Okay, so we've talked about The Desert Between Us. Do you happen to have a copy with you?
I do.
I mean,
It's right
silly
there.
question, right?
Yeah, you're right. Author's always got one handy.
All right. So for those of you on video, when we get this to YouTube, you can see a copy of The Desert Between Us. And if you could let everybody know where they can come and find you and learn more about the book and your writings.
Sure. Well, they can find me on my website, jamescmagruder.com. You'll need to use my middle initial C. James C is in Charles, Magruder, Magruder.com. That's my website. I'm also on Facebook and Instagram at jim.magruder.35. And on Twitter is at James C. Magruder. And then, of course, my email, jamescmagruder@gmail.com. And the book is available on Amazon.com and ChristianBooks.com.
All right. And I'm going to get all those links in the show notes too, so people can come find you and just click directly from there. So, all right. Well, Jim, thank you so much. I truly appreciate the gift of your time, but more so the gift of your stories and the gift
Thank
of
you.
your experience and your willingness to share them with this listenership, with this audience. So,
Yeah, happy to.
all right. Well, thank you very much, and I will catch you on the internet. Didn't I say that Jim was a good storyteller? I had both tears and chills during our conversation. It's not easy for a child to lose a mother. And as you heard, Jim's siblings ranged in age from 4 to 14, both boys and girls. And they all handled this loss and their grief differently. But then God drew them all together, and they found the same faith. And as I mentioned in the episode, I agree with Jim that he will likely never know the why he sought so many years ago. Probably won't know that this side of heaven. But I think we agreed that he is seeing fruits of this grow out of his loss. His grief and the lessons he learned have become gifts for others, gifts that have not only helped him heal, but have helped others to heal as well. I'm so grateful that Jim took time to share his stories with us today. He shared so much beauty that has grown out of his loss and his grief. All of us experience loss in this life. It's just not something we can opt out of. So what lessons can you learn from the losses in your life? And how can you allow beauty to grow from them? Something to think about this week. Until we meet again, armor up, fight the good fight, seek beauty, and make your words warrior words. God bless.